Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Thursday, February 27th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Rice on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Rice's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet, and it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one, where people have been stepped through the worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to them even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your App Store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And if you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app. It contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process. And it contains a copy of the Dragon-Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. And we help people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives, and secondarily because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we'd greatly appreciate you doing so by giving us sending us an email at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org. Or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@whyagain.org. whyagain.org. And if we get a comment or a question from you, we'll address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred, so you can listen back to the archive for your feedback or input. And we greatly appreciate whenever anybody does that, because it makes it infinitely easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service. And there's just no way to put words on how much easier that is to do when we get feedback from you. If you're listening to us on the internet at live.needle.com, nedl.com/mindshiftersradio, we're glad to have you. We're glad you're here. And that does not allow you the capacity to send us a comment or raise a hand to talk live. So if you want to do that, all you need to do is go to your App Store and download the Needle app, N-E-D-L, AI Tuner for Live Radio. Once you download the app, open it, sign in, answer a couple questions. It gives you the opportunity to either type a comment or tap the phone icon and raise a hand and talk to us directly. And we are very, very grateful whenever anybody chooses to do that, because not only does it make it easier for us to live into our intention with this work, it dramatically increases the probability that the show quality will go up. The vast majority of shows we have in the archives that have been labeled specialty shows, best of shows, etc., are shows where people just like you have chimed in, asked a question, or refuted something that we've spoken about, or made a suggestion for a different direction in the topic, or a different book to read, or a different person to interview. And every one of those is greatly appreciated. We appreciate people who listen, we appreciate people who comment, and we appreciate people who call in. I will put out the request once again for any suggestion you might have about someone who's read a book, or who's written a book that you've read that really helped you, or has anything to do with mental health work or spiritual work, that you think it would be of interest for me to interview them or have them on this show. I have the Mind Shifters Radio that we do 1 hour a day, 5 days a week. I also have another project I've been donating my time to, and that's the On Your Mind podcast hosted by Journey's Dream. And this is a nonprofit organization that's trying to help rewrite the narrative on mental health to one in which optimal health and well-being are possible and expected. And anyone you know who's struggling with mental health challenges might benefit from scanning through those podcasts. There are about 191 of them now that are available, and you can find them on theonyourmindpodcast.org or just onyourmindpodcast.org, or you can find them through the Journey's Dream website, journeysdream.org/podcast. And I'm wide open to your comments, questions, and suggestions. I just finished an interview with Dr. Robert Smith about his book, Has Medicine Lost Its Mind? And he is really onto a powerful awareness that about 75% of all mental health challenges in America are, if they're handled at all, they're addressed by primary care physicians who have absolutely no training in the vast majority of issues that people present from the mental health perspective. So, powerful interview. His website is robertsmithmd.com. Please don't forget the MD. Too many Robert Smiths out there. robertsmithmd.com. And on the first page, he's got a link that says Take Action. And if you want to click there, it will show you the email addresses for the president and your congressmen and your senators, and a sample letter that you can copy and paste and amend to your particular story, and make a request for our elected leaders to legislate a change in how medical doctors are trained. And it's not too much to ask. It's the kind of grassroots movement that has had success over the years. If we hadn't had people like Ralph Nader who wrote a book, we would never have, seat belts and airbags in our cars. If we didn't have the woman who wrote the book about, Eternal Spring, whatever her book was, that gave rise to the movement that facilitated the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. And it can happen, and it would be wonderful if it happened in the very near future. And there's some suggestions about how to make it happen in the book by Robert Smith. And Rachel Carson is the one who wrote the book that gave rise to the pressure on the government to create the Environmental Protection Agency. Thank you, Susan Bingham, for that comment. So I am looking forward to getting this published, hopefully a week from Tuesday. The interview with Dr. Robert Smith that I just finished minutes ago will get published, and you'll be able to find that on the journeystream.org/podcast or onyourmindpodcast.org. I would also like to mention that the people over at We Can Do Hard Things podcast have, as I've mentioned on this podcast a number of times before, they've done some real powerful shows. And one that I was listening to this morning, I want to recommend to people. Hannah Gadsby, Gadsby. She apparently has 2 books out now. But their interview of Hannah Gadsby, they republished it a few days ago. And it's the title of their podcast interview is Hannah Gadsby, How to Communicate Better. And it's a replay of an interview they did in the past. And the awareness that someone like Hannah Gadsby can raise about how women, girls, are much less likely to be properly diagnosed with being on the autism spectrum, simply because they show up differently than boys. And the conversation they had that was, to my eye and ear, so wonderful about just being sensitive to certain populations that process the world differently, process sensory information differently, face different challenges. And if that sparks any interest in you, please give that a listen, and maybe read 1 or 2 of the books that Hannah Gadsby has out. Hannah is on the spectrum, and she's also a brilliant stand-up comedian, and she's from Australia, so there are some cultural differences that she talks about, and it's just a wonderful discussion. And if you haven't seen her, I don't know whether they're on Prime or Netflix or whatever, but she's got a couple stand-up comedy routines that are very funny, but also very instructive. And one of the ways that I remember in the first special that she did that I watched, she had a segment where she talked about being in school and having no idea. She didn't get the diagnosis of autistic until she was like 30 or 33, but she was in school as a bright young girl, and the teacher, I think it might have been in English, and they were talking about prepositions, and the teacher was trying to teach people about what a preposition is in language and how it demonstrates your relationship to something else. So this, to most of the neurotypical kids in the classroom, made very good sense. The box is to the left of me, or to the right of me, or it's above me, or below me. And the teacher said, so, what's your relationship to the box? And Hannah kept asking, wait a minute, you're telling me I was related to this box? I didn't know I was related to this box. How can I be related to this box? Until the teacher had to throw her out of the class because the teacher could not comprehend that the very literal interpretation of her words was causing the problem, rather than a kid who was trying to be funny. than, a kid who was trying to be funny creating a problem in her classroom. And it was simply a miscommunication based on somebody who's neurotypical talking to somebody who's on the spectrum, taking the words very literally. And then in the comments, we had the title of the book by Rachel Carson was Silent Spring. And I don't understand Allende's comment, D. Wallace, but he does say you can find it on Needle. So if you'd like to clarify what you're typing a comment about, Allende, I'd be happy to discuss that more. You could raise a hand and we can talk. Or the other thing to note is that these comments are not, the app is currently not letting me know they're comments. I have to just keep flipping back over to check to see if there's a comment. So Hannah Gadsby, On Your Mind podcast, all kinds of options for really good support, information, teaching, training, absolutely free. So let us know what's on your mind. Is this making sense? I had a couple distractions here with technical issues. If I don't get a hand up or a comment from somebody, I'm going to gather myself here and I'll probably return to reading from the book by Alan Cohen titled Of Course in Miracles. As we've been talking about and reading that book with commentary, and the thing I was trying to promote yesterday so much is that the core of what's being offered through these teachings is the idea that you can change your experience of life by changing your perspective, by questioning everything you think you know and asking to be taught rather than walking around, deeply entrenched in your belief system or what you call your knowledge. And the more we can open ourselves to be aware that even if we're really working diligently to learn new things, most of the time what we're going to find out, the more we learn, the biggest thing we learn is how little we actually know. How there's universes of information that we can't even get access to because of the limitation of our senses or because of the skewed perceptions that arrive in front of us based on the distorting power of how we want things to be. And the more you can cancel your goals, the more you can ask to be taught by life, the more you open up possibilities for expanding your experience and giving yourself the increased chances to create a life experience that you prefer. All right, I just checked the comments and somebody's typing a question. How can someone heal from betrayal? For example, why attract this to oneself? Shouldn't the forgiveness work? Or how many times do we need to do this? So the question about how many times do we need to do this, Dr. Michael Rice likes to say, he likes to quote from the biblical passage that when they asked Yeshua how many times do we have to forgive, he said, we have to forgive 77 times 70. And it's not a literal number. He points out that in those passages, numbers like 7 represented the number of completion. And when you added a 0 to a number, it meant infinity. And so Michael Rice interprets that to mean Yeshua said, you must do an infinite number of repetitions of the healing process of forgiveness, of the dismantling of what's less than love in your system until it's completed. And it may be an infinite number. You may be doing it as long as you're taking a breath. And then, the next part of this first question is, why attract this to oneself? Well, one of the best ways I've heard this talked about from Dr. Michael Rice over the years is people ask, how or why did I attract this to myself? And they get into their intellect and they try to weave a set of logical explanations about what this might be teaching them and how it came from childhood and how this and that and all these complex web of connections that they've imagined with their intellect. And Michael Rice offers the perspective that says, if you want to know why this is happening in your life, just turn to look at the negative emotional, the negative experience you're having. That's enough to explain why this event is happening. What does that mean? It means, Michael says, life wants you to thrive. Life wants you to be living from the awareness of your true nature as love. And then giving that love away and giving it away and giving it away. And as you give love, you experience love. That's what life wants from you. So if you're holding anything less than love, any sense of trauma or betrayal or fear that the world isn't a safe place, etc., Michael, one way he says it is the purpose of life is to come along and kick you right in the limitations. And so one way to think about this is that I'm only experiencing this betrayal or this attack or this my vision of the world as being fearful because or dangerous is because I'm holding on to a belief that the world is dangerous or the world is fearful or that people are nasty and just waiting to hurt me. And as that gets stirred up in me, if I'm aware of these tools and aware of this perspective, I can say, oh, I must be misinterpreting this situation that goes on. I must be giving this situation a meaning that I don't need to keep giving it, but now that I've given it that meaning, it's showing me the pain I'm holding. It's showing me the fear. It's showing me the pain that I have attached to the belief that I've been betrayed or the belief that I've been attacked. And the next question here is, shouldn't the forgiveness work? Yes, it should, and it does, right? So sometimes people say, well, I did this worksheet and I feel worse than I did before I started. And there was a wonderful example of this in our last group on Tuesday, because there's a woman who's been coming to these support groups pretty regularly for about 10 years. And she routinely gets overwhelmed and talks about how she doesn't do that many worksheets in different periods because the more worksheets she does, the more upset she feels. And so she prefers to come to the support group and do other things and chant and tone and just change her internal experience. And she did a worksheet on Tuesday, which was one of the first times that when the worksheet was ended and we asked her to take a breath and scan her body and notice how she's feeling, she said, I don't even want to talk right now. I'm just feeling such bliss. And that worksheet started with her having a 9.5 out of 10 level upset. And she went from almost as upset as she's ever been in her life to a bliss state with one worksheet. And the question would be, well, what was the magic in that worksheet? And the answer is there was no magic in that one worksheet process. The magic happened in the dozens of worksheets that she did where she didn't feel much of anything or she felt worse. And as she peels off the layers of the false interpretations or the negative interpretations that she's built up in her mind, it gradually, it's like excavating, one of the ancient tombs. You're digging out in the desert, and all of a sudden you hit something hard, and you say, oh, there must be something here. It's a rock or it's a little vase. But the more you dig, the more you see the vase is connected to a statue that's very tall, and it's connected to 7 other statues, and then there's a tunnel, and then it goes down to a sarcophagus, and then there's more treasure. And if you just keep going, eventually the payoff is there. And the payoff usually comes when I have the willingness to turn and look at the things that I have been unwilling to look at in my life for days, weeks, months, years, or even decades. And then the next comment is, it seems to be very real that these brothers did this on purpose to me. I just can't make it go away. Brothers are also projecting, and doing things of their free will. So just pretending it didn't happen is not very helpful. Well, please understand, there's nothing about this work that asks us to pretend that things aren't happening. Everything about this work is asking us to step back and get a broader perspective. Very much like the piece that I read yesterday from Glennon Doyle about getting a deeper, broader, a higher perspective on things. And so, yes, this situation happened. My culture teaches me that because this situation happened, I'm feeling this anger or this hurt, or I've accurately interpreted this as a betrayal, and then that's generating my pain, my fear, and my sadness. All we're suggesting in this work is not that you ignore what happened, but that you step back, take a breath, comfort yourself first. I love the Sylvia Boorstein, the Jewish Buddhist grandmotherly type woman who would put her hand over her heart space whenever she's upset, and she'd talk to herself gently, and she'd say, Sylvia, sweetheart, you're in pain. Take a few deep breaths, calm down, feel better, then we'll look at what's going on, and then we'll decide what to do. But for now, Sylvia, sweetheart, you're in pain. So the first step in this work is to breathe and soften and turn the focus inside. One of the best things I've learned to do is then ask myself, how am I creating this pain, this fear, this sadness? And take another breath. And perhaps the next best thing for me to do is to ask myself, what am I making this situation mean? Because as Course in Miracles points out, I'm creating all the meaning this moment has for me. This situation, this interaction with this person, I'm the one that's creating it. And if I'm creating all the pain, fear, and sadness that I experience by how I interpret and respond to what I see someone else do, then I'm empowered by breathing and turning inside and focusing on how I'm creating that upset. And then if I'm blessed enough to have tools like the ones Michael and Jeannie Rice put out, I can do the breath work, I can do the Reality Management Worksheet, I can do the EFT tapping, and literally change what I'm doing so I change my experience. The example that just came to mind is that about 6 years ago now, I was having an interaction with somebody, and they said and did something, and then when I asked them about it later, they denied doing it. And so my mind said, they're lying. They're lying to me. And I generated a tremendous amount of upset. And I knew this work, and so I started doing worksheets and EFT tapping, and I did it for the next few days. I did EFT tapping and worksheets, and it was the interaction had been recorded, and so there wasn't any doubt about what happened. but the person still wouldn't admit it. And I just generated all of this upset. I was disrupting my sleep at night. It would come to me during the day. And eventually, about 2 or 3 nights later, I forget exactly the timing of this, I woke at like 3 in the morning and I did another worksheet where my upset was, anger, hurt, or confusion. I forget what the upset was. But the thought I had that was generating my upset was, this person's lying to me. And my goal was for this person to, be completely honest and to do their own work. And finally, there was probably a dozen or more worksheets on this. Finally, as I breathed and softened and canceled that goal, I flashed on something when I was 14 years old. And my father caught me dead to rights in a lie, and I could not bring myself to tell him the truth. And I was pretty much, I was a kid, I was a teenager, and for the most part, I would be honest unless I thought something got triggered in me and I went into a panic state. Something about this situation had me panicked. So I realized that, I had that thought, and so then I did another worksheet on the situation that happened when I was 14. I probably did 3 more worksheets that night on the upset that I felt at 14 when my father caught me dead to rights and I could not bring myself to tell him the truth. And finally, in the last worksheet I needed to do on that, I let myself see the tremendous shame and fear that I had downloaded as a 14-year-old because of a completely false belief. And it got locked away in my consciousness from basically 50 years, and from 14 until, my mid-60s, and that was it. It was stuck there. And I never told anybody about that. I never told anybody the truth of what happened. I never told anybody that I lied to my dad. And as soon as I did that worksheet, tears were streaming down my face. I had to sit up in bed because they were pooling in my ears. I breathed. I did some tapping. Immediately, when I thought back about the current moment situation and this other person that, minutes before I thought I was upset because they lied to me, I had compassion. And it didn't matter at all anymore whether or not this person ever admitted what they said. The dismantling of the process in me changed everything about what I was feeling in the moment, a lot about what my perception was of the events and the importance of them. So I didn't pretend, oh, this person isn't lying. I simply immediately felt, oh, if this person's refusing to admit what is blatantly obvious and on the recording, they must be in the same kind of trauma emotionally that I was at 14 that caused me to shut down. And then compassion was open, and compassion has remained open in me for that person ever since. It's not about denying what they're doing. It's about becoming aware that what they're doing is not causing the upset I'm generating. So I hope that's of use to you, light of the world. And if you have more questions or comments, you can type them in the chat room or the app, or you can put a hand up to call. I'm checking the phones, and here's Allende. Are you available? Well, it says you're available, but I'm not hearing anything. So I would ask anybody else.
Hi there.
Anything? Now I have some noise. Is that road noise?
Yeah, I'm driving. Sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for having me on your show, Dr. Tim. That was a great story about the upset that you experienced. I try to share. I've tried in the past to share this information, school of thought, with other people, and I've noticed that their resistance is the same resistance that I had, and we all have. It's like, how can you say it's not this person's fault that's stepping on my toe when they're stepping on my toe? And it takes a lot of introspection to realize that, you're creating the situation, and that you are the source of all that you experience. But I called in actually to clarify my comments on the app, if you wanted to talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah, Dee Wallace is one of my advisors, teachers, and she's a great person that you could try to interview around this work. She does a different modality, but she's really amazing. And you may recognize the name from E.T. She was the mom in E.T. and has done a lot of work in Hollywood over the years.
All right. Just DEE Wallace.
Dee Wallace, yeah, two E's, yeah.
And so somehow or another, she has become a teacher or a mentor for you, and she does some kind of psychological or spiritual work.
Yeah, she does. In fact, she had a show for years on Blog Talk Radio. In fact, yeah, yeah. And the other comment that I was making is the podcast that you're recommending with Gadsby. Your listeners can find it on Needle. 55 million podcasts. The plug here. 55 million podcasts, 40 million songs. You can search for it. What was the podcast title again?
We Can Do Hard Things.
Yeah, We Can Do Hard Things can be found on Needle. So yeah. So hopefully that's helpful to people who are listening.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you. And I will look into the Dee Wallace recommendation. Is she still actively teaching or supporting people in doing spiritual work
Most
or
certainly, most certainly.
psychological work?
Yeah. And if I may support you in this effort because this isn't just a new platform. It's also a slightly different type of show. It's like a traditional radio show. Sharing with your audience when you're going to take callers, might be more helpful for you. So, you read the book and then you say, hey, I'll be taking callers after this, and then that's when you can check, and then you'll see who's waiting for you, and you don't have to worry about constantly checking, because you just kind of appoint the time yourself when you want to take the callers. So you're in charge.
All right. I will give it a try.
All right. Well, blessings. Thank you so much. I'm working on myself listening to this, and really appreciate your work.
Well, you're most welcome and deserving. Thanks for the app that's allowing us to continue to do it.
Thank you.
Drive safely.
Thank you. Will do. I missed my exit, but I'll be okay. All right. Bye-bye. Thanks.
All right. Okay. So here we are with plenty of time to take another comment or a question or a caller. I've tried to turn on the microphone for Susan Bingham. Are you there?
I am. Hi, Dr. Tim.
Welcome.
Thanks. Well, several things. I'm backtracking way back to the beginning when you were talking about medical doctors needing to be trained differently. And I've been listening to a woman, see if I can dredge up her name. She's an Australian medical doctor. She claims to be 92 years old and looks like a 50-year-old. So there's a good advertisement for doing something right. Barbara O'Neill. I've had some joint issues. And of course, being the age that I am, I start off by saying, well, here we go. Michael gets on my case all the time. I call myself getting decrepit. He says, oh, no, don't use that word. This doesn't have to be. Anyway, she was talking today about the fact that most of our medicines, or many of them, are created from natural things like garlic and turmeric and
Okay,
um,
so would this be the author of things like Natural Remedies?
I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you. It's every once in a while. I must have subscribed at one point because something pops up and I listen to her.
Are you saying that she's a medical doctor?
I believe she is, or a homeopathic doctor. In any case, she understands medical things. And for instance, today she was just saying that ginger is the best natural antibiotic that there is, and it has no side effects. And so, and that a newborn infant can be treated with it by putting a piece of garlic on the bottom of the baby's foot. For instance, it will be absorbed into the blood from the baby's foot. You don't even have to make the baby drink or eat something. So that's just one thing that I wanted to say, that we're beginning to come together, I think, in not in the mainstream medical, but like you interviewed my friend Kristen Ryman. She was a family medical doctor, but couldn't find the kind of help she needed when she had Lyme disease, and became a functional medical doctor and an acupuncturist and several other things just to find a way to heal herself. And now she's
Back to functioning, yeah.
she's functioning, very highly functioning. So that was just one thing. There's no question there. I was just going to say the internet is rich and wonderful with information like that. Of course, there's always a danger of fake news and fake information all the way along the line too. There's a lot of, for instance, there's a lot of controversy now about vaccines, including ones that we in the old days always thought were the difference between a pandemic or a life and death. For instance, the polio vaccine or the measles vaccine. All of a sudden, there are people arguing that there are natural ways to not get measles and not get polio. And so it's a rich and confusing field. And that isn't a question either. It's just amazing. But the other thing I was thinking of, unless you want to say something to all that before I ramble on.
No, we'll just let that go since I'm not an expert in the vaccines and the medical side of things. So
Yeah,
it's good to have that resource out there. I'll look up Barbara O'Neill and
she's
so
she's she's lovely. Yeah. The other thing is, I was thinking about the question that the woman or man who calls, I'm not on my phone anymore. Where did it go? The comment, the person who, light of the world, the light of the world person. If you're into something like an extreme event in your life, like the loss of a child, and I'm remembering that Byron Katie was approached by a young mother whose daughter took her own life in her early teens. And of course, nobody in the audience would think that that woman shouldn't be upset. And I don't think anyone would say that after 2 months or 2 years, the woman should stop grieving. I know there's a lot of discussion about how long people should grieve before they get over it. But she said an amazing thing to this mother, suggesting that the mother think of her daughter as having done the most loving thing she could for herself because she was in such pain, and that taking your own life was an act of kindness. I can imagine being a mother, if my child might have done that, being very helped by a comment like that. Go ahead.
well you're just talking about what we were talking about yesterday, shifting perspective.
Right,
If
exactly.
I have someone that I love who takes their own life, and I keep thinking, how could they do that to me? I
Hmm.
generate anger and hurt and confusion. if I have somebody that I know that takes their own life, and I take the perspective that you just talked about, offered by Byron Katie, and I know a lot of others, I say, oh, bless their hearts. I wish I had a way to help them out of their pain that wasn't so dramatic, but at least now they're not in pain. And what they did was excellent self-care there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't matter what the truth of it is. What matters is if I choose a different perspective, I generate a different emotional response inside of me.
Right. That seemed like such an extreme example that I was thinking, oh, well, he's not talking about suicide. He's not talking about loss of a child. That's in another category. But it isn't. It isn't, hard as that is. So, and the last thing I wanted to comment on, you talked about Alan Cohen having a little game in an airport with a friend, pretending they were in heaven. And I thought, I'm going to do that. And I even gave it as an idea for our support group, which meets on Wednesdays. I said, let's explore what it would be like if we went through our lives from the perspective that we're already in heaven, that whatever is happening is in heaven. And I've been having a darn hard time with that, Dr. Tim. I realize how many grumbles and complaints I have in my mind. I'm thinking, well, this isn't the way I want it to be. I mean, if I did a worksheet for every thought that came through with that idea of pretending you're in heaven, well, I'd never stop. It's just an amazing exercise, worth doing though, but still.
Well, if it helps, then keep doing it. If you try it and it doesn't work for you, then let it go. For a lot of years now in therapy, I say to people, I don't even try to be right. I just try to not do the same thing that isn't working over and over and over again. So if I offer something to you and it doesn't seem to resonate with you, or you try it and it doesn't work for you, I say then just let it go.
Either
and
that
try
or
something else.
Or it really worked. Shows me the next 4,200 wake-up sheets that need doing. Anyway, just a comment. Rich stuff.
Well, and the thing about it is that there's a comment here in the app about it doesn't relate to me, and they don't know why we're talking about the suicide, etc. And my answer to that would be simply because we're just highlighting the fact that whether it's I'm a little bit upset, and I think I'm upset because I just spilled some coffee, or because somebody came in the middle of my trying to do the internet show, somebody opened the door to my office and started talking to me. It doesn't matter whether it's that kind of upset that I'm feeling from something that you might call small or innocuous, or it's a major life-threatening thing. If I'm generating upset over it, I'm the one generating the upset. If I'm relating to the world as though the world is causing my upset, then every time I feel upset, I either have to escape from the world or change the world in order to change how I'm feeling. In this work, we say, look, you can change the perspective you're choosing. You can change the interpretation you're choosing, and literally in moments change the emotion you're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say to people, for a lot of years now, I've had the saying that came to me in one of the, I don't know whether it was a support group or on the internet show. Once I recognize that I'm the one creating any offense that I feel, if somebody comes up to me and tells me, I'm stupid and I'm ugly and I'm bald-headed and I walk funny, and if I generate upset around that, and I think it's because they heard me, then I get lost. Now I'm on a wild goose chase trying to figure out how to change so that they like me better, or how to get them to quit throwing insults at me or whatever. But if I recognize that the only thing that ever comes out of somebody's mouth is going to teach me about what's going on inside of them, it's going to teach me about their pain, fear, and sadness, or their joy and their bliss state, it's never going to teach me about me or the world around me, then I don't have to take offense. I don't have to generate offense or take offense. We say, don't take offense. And I say, please don't take offense even if it's offered.
Mm.
Even if somebody comes right to your face and starts yelling at you, there's no reason for you to get offended, because what's coming out of that person's mouth is about them. It's
Mm.
about their pain, fear, and sadness. It's not about you. And if you want evidence of this, find somebody who's grumpy, who doesn't like you, and try to make them happy. You don't have the capacity to create or maintain the emotional state of anyone or any group of people around you. You do have the capacity, once you are empowered, once you have this perspective, once you learn the tools, to change your emotional state moment to moment. Does that make sense?
It does, yep.
This is why sometimes people say, "Oh yeah, but what you're talking about is just a little thing, right?" So they kicked me out of my house, or they ran into my car and drove away and didn't leave a note, and or they lied to me, and they lied to my boss, and then my boss got angry at me and I lost my job, or I got written up, and now if I have one more thing, these are real events that happen, and I don't need to take offense. I don't need to generate sadness or fear or anger around it. I probably will, because of the culture I'm raised in, because that's what the automatic process is. It's been trained into my mind-body energy system. And yet if I learn these tools, I can fix it. And then some people come along and say, well, yeah, that's for a little thing like a car accident, or and then I pull out the book by Pierre Predervan about Roger McGowan, on death row in Texas for a crime he didn't commit for 26 years. And instead of choosing bitterness, choosing depression, choosing vengeance, he chose for love, and became a spiritual teacher to thousands of people. So, it's like what the Course in Miracles says, there's no order of difficulty in miracles. You can dismantle your upset over a little car accident, a little spilling of coffee, or the loss of a loved one. It's because the dynamic that's creating your upset is inside you, and it's all related to the trauma energies and emotional belief energies you carry in you, and what interpretation you choose and then place on these life events. And that's the good news. The good news is my emotions are not caused by the life events around me, especially once I've been trained to be aware of that, and then I have access to tools like the ones Michael and Jeannie make available, or the EFT tapping, or we had somebody call in for the support group a couple weeks ago, and he lives in this area, but he was out in another state, and he was triggered to tremendous upset, and he started doing the worksheet, and he couldn't even breathe enough to finish talking. So we just stopped and did about 5 minutes or more of different rounds of EFT tapping, and just to calm the system and have him demonstrate to himself that he's okay. And so we have the EFT tapping, we have the breath work, we have the Reality Management Worksheet, we have the worksheet, the 3 early memories of conflict. I did that with another patient in my office last week. Brought out the 3 early memories of conflict worksheet and helped this 30-something start outlining what it is he carries inside of him that makes him afraid to talk to important people in his life today. And there are all kinds of tools that Michael and Jeannie make available, and if you're willing to use them, and you're lucky enough to have been exposed to them, and if you're willing to question everything you think you know about how I know I'm upset because they did this or they did that, then the world opens up. So, somebody just typed in the chat room, sometimes I get confused and I wonder if I'm on the spectrum as well. Well, it's just, they call it a spectrum because you can have just a tiny bit of it, or you can have a moderate amount of it, or a lot of it. But there are people who would say we're all on the spectrum. I mean, at one level or another, that's why they call it a spectrum. Every one of us can say and do things that might be interpreted by somebody else as rude or insensitive, or, make a jump from what's intended to be a casual toss-off comment to a literal, concrete interpretation of it, and then generate a bunch of offense. Or because I interpret what somebody said very literally, then they get offended, as in the example with Hannah Gadsby and her teacher, because Hannah just kept asking what made perfect sense to her, because she didn't think about spatial relationships like up and down and above or below, or she thought in terms of family relationships, and she started asking her teacher, what do you mean how I'm related to the box? I didn't know I was related to the box. And so Hannah, taking that statement from the teacher literally, and the teacher not being able to understand that she had taken it literally, was used by both of them to generate quite a bit of conflict and upset, where neither one of them was intending to offend the other or create an upset. So I hope that makes some sense. I just looked down and realized that we're out of time. I don't know if Susan Bingham is on the call anymore, but thank you so much for the call, Susan. I'll offer you blessings. And I will remind us all that this show will end, and then you can open the app again when Michael and Jeannie come on for the second hour. I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false, and I'll offer you my blessings.